Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm with Bryan, who I referred to as Gary a little bit earlier. I'm over here with Bryan, and of course
really
I'm Richard.
Meaningful, yeah.
I know. And so, listen, what we want to do on these Wednesdays is we just want to have during this Breaking Culture series. We just want to have a little bit of a discussion each Wednesday based upon the sermon that was preached the week before. And so this past Sunday, you preached, and you really preached on the fact that how can we have faith in a culture of doubt? So strong. I really enjoyed it. And I just want to get straight into the first question, unless you have anything you want to say initially about your sermon.
No. Just if you're joining, welcome. We're so thrilled you're here. We're going to just fire through some questions. Should be a fun time.
Absolutely. So one of your points was in that sermon on Sunday was that faith isn't about what you have inside. It's about who is with you. So it's not about necessarily your own confidence or who you are, but it's about who's with you. And you said this. You said there's a big difference between self-confidence and spirit confidence. So my question to you is, somebody who heard that and is thinking, well, you know what, as I kind of think about it, I kind of do everything with my own confidence, and really I want to shift that, and I want to put more confidence in the Spirit who lives with me. So how does one do that? If someone says, I want to make that a goal, and I want to make some first steps even this week towards that, how does someone go from self-confidence to spirit confidence? How do they get more confidence in the Lord?
That's a great question. It's funny, even as you're speaking, doesn't it feel like Sunday was ages ago?
It does, yeah.
It's just like, I'm trying to remember, I did say that. I don't have a great answer for that. I mean, just so you know, we haven't rehearsed these questions.
He's not rehearsed.
He's asking me on the spot. And spiritual formation is such a unique process to everyone. Right? To say, here's 2 things, 3 things, sometimes that stuff wears me out too. And there's like, here's the 3 steps. It's like you're trying to lose 5 pounds. So, what I would say maybe at a high level would be, I read something that really was interesting, but it was called this idea of identity resistance. And the idea was, so often we don't understand who we are in Jesus. So it was like this. And he used this great illustration. He said, part of the reason we don't have a spirit confidence, if you will, he didn't use those words, but part of the reason we struggle with faith is that we don't really understand our identity as Jesus. So he talked about the idea of, if someone is trying to quit smoking and someone comes up to you and say, hey, do you want to smoke? You say, I'm trying to quit. What you're basically doing is saying, hey, like, my identity is a smoker, I'm trying to get away from it. But if you just say I don't smoke, that's not your identity. And his point was, oftentimes when it comes to things like sin, people will be like, I'm trying to overcome this sin. But if you go, no, I don't do that, I'm a saint, I'm not just a sinner, then all of a sudden you are framing in your mind this idea of who you are. And oftentimes what happens is we tell ourselves what we're not, right? Like, I'm never going to overcome this, I'm not at the deep faith yet, per the sermon, I'm not praying as long as everyone else does. And we just spend time almost trying to reinforce what we're not versus telling ourselves who we are, that you are a saint, that you have the power of Jesus inside of you, that you are redeemed, that you are brought with the blood of Jesus, that you are holy and righteous, that the way that God now sees you is the way he sees his son Jesus, because he sees Jesus' life in you. I mean, those are things that we don't do. So I just say that's probably what I would say is real spirit confidence comes from just knowing your identity, and that's not easy to get to, but it's so important.
Yeah, I love that. I would, if I just want to chime in, I would chime in and say, not only knowing who you are, but practicing who you are.
Yep, totally.
And so, I mean, I think of, Richard Foster's Spiritual Disciplines book. And I think, if somebody wants to gain confidence in the Lord, begin to practice the spiritual disciplines. Right? Begin to make that a part of what you do on an everyday basis, whether that be prayer, whether that be fasting, whether that be daily Bible reading. Make that a part of your normal everyday diet. And the more that you do that, the more confidence you're going to have in the Lord. And also, I think the more that you do those things, the more you're going to realize who you are.
It is the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, take, nowadays we were laughing, I was hanging out with some guys the other night. Nowadays you YouTube everything, right? And the first time you YouTube a project, like if you're like me, I'm like, how do I fix this toilet, or how do I do this thing on the fence? It's like, You just watch step by step. The more you do it, the more confidence you get, right? Like, it's a little overwhelming, but, come the third time I'm fixing, the fill valve on a toilet, I'm like, I think I got this. But the first time, it's intimidating. So I do think, to your point, if you're going to get practical, like, people will be like, well, I don't know where to begin. And it's like, well, you didn't know where to begin when you were riding a bike, right? Like, you didn't know where to begin when you were even first married. It's like people, will be like, oh my gosh, it's really difficult living with this person. I'm like, yeah. What do? You just give it time. Like, the more you do it, the more you sometimes fight or rearrange things. Of course, my wife and I never fight, right? Like, it's just like, but for other people that struggle with that, I'm sure that's what I've heard.
Yep.
But that idea of, like, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you do something, the more usually you get better at it, the more you become familiar with it. So I do think spending time with Jesus, like, people go, how do I hear from God? Well, keep listening, keep trying to engage, and you probably can hear better, 2 years in than you could, when you first became a Christian or whatever. So anyway,
even as you were talking, I'm going to get to the second question, but even as you were talking, I think about people that in our church that may be thinking, man, I really want to do this. I really want to really identify and know who I am. And one of the things that may be helpful for them is to find somebody who can model that. Yeah. And obviously, discipleship is a massive deal here at our church, and we put a lot of emphasis on that. And so if there's some people that are saying, man, I really want to take the next step, maybe for them a really tangible next step would be enter into a discipling relationship. That's
good. Yep.
And I just want to say to any of you folks that are listening today, if that's you, just contact us. I mean, let us know at the church that you're interested in that relationship, and then we may be able to help identify someone that can walk through a process with you, to kind of model that faith and also teach you spiritual disciplines and walk a path of discipleship with you. That certainly may be helpful.
Love it.
So
good stuff.
All right, second question. You talked about towards the end of your message that we need to evaluate our pursuit with Christ. In fact, you said this. You said shallow faith can and will grow into great faith. You talked about shallow and deep faith, but then you talked about this. You talked about focus and pursuit, that we really need to have a focus and also pursue the Lord. And so I'm going to ask you this. Give me some characteristics of someone who is actively pursuing the Lord more than anything else. That's the number one priority in their life. And we talked about this whole idea about breaking culture, that we really want to be a church, we want to be a body of believers that are different than our culture, that are not a part of our culture, but in our culture, but certainly different than our culture. And I think a lot of that is people that are actually actively pursuing the Lord. So what does that kind of person look like? What characteristics do they have?
The first thing when you said that came to mind was just the word available. Mm-hmm. It's probably not. That's the great thing about faith, right? Like, you look who Jesus assembled, and, like, if you're building a basketball team or you're building, like, when I was in the 90s, the dream team was, this is not a dream team. Like, who's on Jesus' team? You're like, huh. And we say that, but then we kind of, like, I've heard all kinds of Christians go, the disciple dream teams. And then they don't apply that logic to themselves, and they go, like, God will never use me and all that. So I just think, I can't remember, you might remember, there's a scripture that is stuck out. I think it's Acts, where it says, like, they were common, ordinary men, but they had been with Jesus. Like, people were amazed that they had been with Jesus. In essence, they're available. And oftentimes what we will do is we'll go, hey, God, I'll give you 10 minutes. And even that 10 minutes is like, I'm brushing my teeth or I'm trying to wrangle the kids. Like, I'm not really available. That's that whole idea. Like, I'll get in trouble sometimes at the table because it's like, I'm there, but I'm not really there. I'm on my phone. And the idea of, like, devotionals and rhythms, I think, probably being available, like, throughout the day. Like, it's one thing also to start a day with God. It's another thing to spend a day with him. Yep. Right? Like, the idea that I gave Jesus 10 minutes, but then the rest of the day I'm disengaged from him. And I think there's a difference between devotions and spiritual mindedness. That whole idea of pray without ceasing? Like, it's like, dude, like, in some ways, Jesus would rather you spend 10 minutes of devotional time, but then pray throughout the day, which means little breaks in time with him where your just compass is more pointed towards him. I'm not great at this. Like, I'll kind of go, here's my hour, Jesus, and then the rest of the day I'm kind of like, it's almost like my spiritual tank is just depleting. So way long way of saying I think available is what I would say is the first step. I mean, I would just, every time I saw Jesus in the scriptures, it's like he's breaking away.
Yeah.
He's available to spend time with the Father. And so that's one of the things I'd say.
And along with availability is the being open to be interrupted, right?
Yep.
So, and that's part of being available, because I think so many times when we're pursuing Christ and the Spirit would lead us to potentially do something that's going to, number one, cost us time,
Yeah.
right? And it's also going to take us out of our comfort zone, right? But are we available to do those uncomfortable things that's going to cost us, where we have to sacrifice, and do we allow our interruptions in our normal life to do the things that the Spirit's leading us to do?
Yeah.
I'm mindful. This weekend, I had an honor to be able to go to North Carolina and to participate in the wedding of Ashley Cobb. Of course, I think people know that Ashley got married this weekend. Those of you who know who Ashley is.
Okay, what's her last name now?
She's Ashley Kamoski now. But her dad said Ashley Kamoski, but her dad said to call her Cobb Moski.
I refuse to call. I'm going to still call her Cobb. I'm sorry to.
Oh my goodness! So she is now Ashley Kamoski. But anyway, the point of me saying that is because while I was there, I got a phone call from one of our church members.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
did you call him by the right name, or did you call him?
I know I called him by the right name. It was actually a text message.
Richard just called me Gary at the beginning of his thing.
It was actually a text message. And what had happened is he was at Home Depot just running some errands, but he came across someone that he really felt the Spirit leading him to help.
Yes.
And so he called me and he basically said, I don't know what to do. Like, what do I do? What are some steps? And so we walked through and talked about some things. And what he thought, I think, was going to take him, 3 or 4, 10 minutes out of his schedule, it ended up being an hour or so that day, and ended up being even more time on the phone trying to connect this lady with some people. And it was tough, and it was difficult, and it was an interruption. And I think at one point he told me, I never thought following the Lord or doing the right thing was going to cost so much time, but I think it does, right? Totally. But the beautiful thing out of that is that when we're really pursuing the Lord, those interruptions are not frustrating, are they? Those interruptions are joy-filled, and those interruptions have the satisfaction of knowing that we're doing the exact thing that God's called us to do.
What I think part of that is again, I don't know, but some of his master classes, there was a quote in one of his master classes. I might be quoting the hours wrong, but they were saying for anyone to really hone in on a craft, they have to spend 15,000 hours on it.
Yep.
And you start calculating how much time you spend with Jesus throughout the week, and you go, man, it takes a long time to get to 15,000 hours if you're giving 6 minutes here, 8 minutes here. And it's not shaming someone. It's just simply going like, this, again, going back to what I said, the self-fulfilling prophecy is the more you do something, the more confident you get, whether it's fixing something in the house or, like the more you do something, the more you get familiar. Well, the more time you spend with Jesus, the more you're going to learn to hear from him, the more you're going to be deeper in your faith. And even from a pragmatic standpoint, because oftentimes we don't always apply common sense to faith stuff, but, if it takes 15,000 hours to hone a craft, that's pretty logical, then it would probably, be good to think, well, I'm not going to be legalistic about this, but the more I am available, the more I'm finding time, I'm probably going to find myself in deeper waters. And that's where I would encourage people. That actually is encouraging to me, because it's not something wrong with my temperament or my makeup. It's just, how present can I be, which is really encouraging, to me in that same point. So,
I love the fact that we have our 5 Gs.
Yep.
Because I do feel like the 5 Gs gives us a little bit of a train track to run on.
Yep.
Right? It gives us some rails and helps guide us. And so if you do want to pursue the Lord, I think you can look towards the 5 Gs.
Yep.
Grace, gather, grow, give, go. Are you doing those things? What do those things mean? And so I think if you're looking for some way to measure,
that's a great point.
I think you can measure yourself against those 5 Gs, right?
I'll change my answer to that. That's practical. I like that. See, I'm more in the clouds. No, I do think that's true, because, you could probably go, how am I doing in those areas? And you can probably pretty quickly go, well, I'm not meeting with anybody. I'm not spending time with Jesus. Really not serving. Not taking this evangelism thing seriously. So I think that's a great point. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Next time I'm going to interview you.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think so. I like being on this side of the table. Well, hey, thanks for joining us so much. We're glad that you chose to join us. We'll be back next week. Next week, I'll actually have Gary, because Gary will. Yeah, he'll be preaching. Gary's preaching on Sunday, so I actually will interview him next week. And so thank you so much. I hope that today you do make a decision to really pursue the Lord regardless of what that costs you.
Yeah, and let me just say this, even though we're done. One of you guys gave me a great practice on being mindful, but they put little prayer time on their alarm, their phones, or I'm sorry, they put little, like 3 little alarms throughout the day.
Yep.
And they just said those go off, and that's helped them with that idea of being available, because they were really good at starting off in the morning. So maybe that's something super practical, like today, as you get done with this, or if you're watching this at the very end, put a couple alarms on your phone, and when that goes off, just 5 minutes. You don't have to go crazy. Just try to be in tune with Jesus and see what that does for you. I think that will really help your faith move into the deep end. So do that as well.